Hello, welcome to today's HR Huddle. Welcome, Jen. It's been a little while. I think we've been traveling around this summer and cannot believe it's the last Monday before the holiday week anyway. I know it's not the full last Monday of the week, but or of the month. And so we're here today to talk about some organizing principles as Jen and I have been traveling to firms and, moderating sessions and, attending conferences and talking to HR leaders, around the country. One of the things that we know, and it's not just HR leaders, I think just leadership teams in general, but we're going to talk about it from an HR perspective and talent perspective is how do we get organized and clarity around who owns what in each of our various functions? And we could spend some time looking at this in our different departments and our different initiatives that we're moving, and just these organizing principles that we have been getting clarity on with leaders. And one of them that has been coming up is just organizing around who owns what around talent development. And so we thought we would just spend a few minutes today in this HR huddle and talk about some of the new roles that we're seeing come in, which we think is great, but might be creating some fuzziness or confusion, or not mine anymore and hands off, and which means nobody might be doing it. And how do we identify, what do we need to have defined around talent development and who owns, each of those, various elements to make sure our people are getting feedback, they're getting developed, et cetera. So, Jen, anything you want to add to that kind of wrapper as we're talking about that and setting that up?
Well, I'm going to add something pretty decently big and try to make it small.
Okay.
And that is what does own mean? And, the reason that we want to talk about this is because when something has a clear owner, then it thrives. And when it doesn't have a clear owner, whether there's a bunch of us who think we own it or nobody owns it, then it doesn't thrive. It doesn't do well. It doesn't move. It could fail. It could flail. And as your organization grows and as it changes and as it shifts, as people retire, as people quit, as new people start, as new roles are developed, as groups are merged in, as departments become their own separate group, all these little organizational shifts happen, ownership gets murky, super murky. And we see it constantly in our consulting with firms. And even in your HR group, even in your talent function, if we came in and started asking you like, who owns recruiting? Oh, I do, I guess, or she does too. We both do it. Well, who owns doing the thinking and the planning and the communicating around it? That's who the owner is. And when we say thinking, planning, communicating, a lot of people are like, well, we're all thinking about it. Or, who owns giving Caroline performance feedback? Well, she works with all of us. I mean, we all own it. And when everybody owns something, no one owns it. And so anyway, what is owning? And owning is so huge, but so is the job of clarifying who owns what. And it is continuous. It never ends. It never stops. It's never finished because somebody who owned that stuff quit. And now we have to parse it up while we're replacing that person. And we have to be clear who's going to take the pieces until the new person comes or whatever it may be. So I just thought that was an important clarifier because we're seeing some interesting things happening in new roles and new ways of thinking of ownership inside different departments and service lines and things like that. So I think that was our subject today, but bearing in mind the owner thinks, plans, and communicates.
Well, and I think that's a great setup. And so when we were looking at the new roles that might come in, and if you think about, like the swim lanes, that's one of the ways, like get it written down on paper or get it written down on a flip chart or, in a Word document or something, just so you can start to say, okay, who owns the different components? And you might see nobody does, or we're still sharing it, or it's moving because of these new roles. And so we need to start to say, where do we move that, or how do we shift what that ownership is? And one of them that's come up, and we'll just use this for an example, and then we can apply, other examples as we go. But one of them that's been coming up is who owns developing our people and who owns providing them feedback and ensuring that they have, a career plan and career goals, and they're progressing and winning here at our firm. And when we ask that question, we get a lot of everybody, like you just said, Jen. And we get a lot of, the manager or the partner does, or the engagement manager or HR, or but we're also creating new roles. We've got resource managers, we've got schedulers. Some firms are, dabbling in the idea of, external talent coaches. Or we might have career coaches, but then we have, the partner that's on the job, and it's just very confusing. And it has been in public accounting. We've had dotted lines forever, and that's not going to go away. But we say one person needs to be responsible for owning that person's, that individual's. We'll use Caroline since you brought that up. Caroline's, progression here at Convergence Coaching. And so how do we define that? And so if Tamera is her career manager or her career coach, I am responsible for ensuring she's getting feedback, doing her performance reviews with input from others, setting, goals, meeting with her on a, regular basis. And we should define regular, maybe quarterly against her goals, and maybe weekly against priorities. I'm responsible for getting feedback and figuring out what kind of maybe training or development that she needs, and that she's got the tools and support to be able to do that. But Tamera clearly owns that. Now, other people are scheduling things. So we've got, a scheduler that is doing scheduling for projects. That's Renee. Renee doesn't necessarily own that career progression for Caroline, but she might have input, she might have feedback, she might have ideas as she's working with her. And so we've got other roles that we're creating, within public accounting. And we think it's getting murky, to use your word, Jen, to identify what that is.
Well, and another thing I want to say about that career advisor or coach, performance manager, those are all words I could get behind. Talent advisor even, but I don't like mentor, which is squishy and soft and sounds like a lunch now and then, and you can take what I say or not. And, it doesn't feel very structured, and it doesn't feel very truly I stand for the company's desires for your performance and growth, as opposed to these are just my opinions. And one day back when I was your age, I did these things, which is a totally different, mentors are great, but that's not what we're talking about here. Well, another role of that talent advisor, career coach, or whatever you want to call it, is advocacy. And so, my job isn't just like making sure that, we have goals for you and that you're clear on your areas for development and that we have a learning plan, like Tamera said. It's also stopping and saying, how are you doing? How's it feeling? How can I help you? And then advocating on their behalf in whatever way is necessary, or saying, hey man, I don't know if anybody's been noticing this incredible growth and all this learning that my person has been doing. And I just want to have the attention of the room turn on to my person for a minute. And let's talk about, she's gone from here to there. And she didn't even know how to do those things. And now she not only can do them, but she's doing them with really wonderful skill and mastery. And wow, this is amazing. And making sure other people notice, because we're all so busy. Nobody is paying attention with the same sort of laser focus that the career coach is supposed to. That's why we think every person needs one name that's supposed to be thinking and planning and noticing and paying attention for that person. And we don't really care who that person is. We want them, though. We do have one thing we really do care about, and they have to be a people person. And that might sound silly. Like what I just said was so obvious.
Yes.
Come on, talent advisor has to be a people person. Well, duh. But we find in firms that, we tend to be a technical profession, and we tend to almost glorify technical skills. We overemphasize them in early days. We weed out anybody who doesn't have any technical skills. The higher the technical IQ often, the lower the relational IQ. So the people get kind of pushed out the door early in our profession. And we've been advocating for that change for decades now. Stop doing that. Stop taking people and pushing them out. And then at year 7 saying, where are all my people? Because they're gone. You got rid of them. So instead, take people and put them on people tasks. And in their early days, when they're first joining the firm, they can participate as a buddy, or they can, help with new employee orientation, or they can assist with training, or they can, kind of be on the lookout in more of an informal people role. But as they get to be senior or supervisor, they can become career advisors with the right training and the right mentorship. They can also network and do business development and relationship development with clients, and they can do all sorts of on-campus work and who knows what else, the relational things that we really need done. And so anyway, I think it goes without saying that talent advisors, or these people assigned to really mentor, manage, develop, give performance feedback to all of our people, need to be people. But if we got militant about that right now in your firm, you'd have to skinny down how many people got to do it, because they're not all people.
And we probably need to give some training and coaching and help them, first of all, frame what it means to be a career advisor or a career coach, and then how to give feedback in meaningful, constructive ways, how to set meaningful goals that help build on strengths, and develop what's next so the person can progress. That's just not always innate, and so we need to teach that. We need to document it. We need to talk about it. And we probably just assign people a lot of times just to say, all right, you are now the career advisor for Sam and Tom and Jack, and don't provide a lot of definition or skills building or role playing, around it. So that's the other piece of it for us to, focus on and identify.
I couldn't agree more, Tamera. And some firms have had us in, and we've had the privilege of working with their coaches or their talent advisors on a regular basis, annual cadence or something, and building skills in certain areas. And it's not just feedback. I mean, feedback's probably the scariest one, but the whole relational piece. How do I build depth in that relationship, and real vulnerability and courage and transparency and all the wonderful, important elements that would cause you to tell me what's really up, what your real hopes and dreams and fears are. So, teaching people those relational skills, and then teaching them about your business processes around people. How often do we evaluate performance, and what systems are we using? And so there's this whole process piece to this job that needs to be defined and described, and what is my role in that process? And as I go up the chain of command, if you will, and grow in my leadership as a people or talent advisor, I will be privy to more things. Maybe I can influence more the salaries of the people that work in my talent advisor group, or whatever it might be. So how does my authority and my input and advocacy change and morph as I develop? So those are all things to be looked at when you're doing that learning plan for your career advisors or performance managers or whatever you call them. And in addition to training and getting people, we have to pay attention to how many people each person can be a real developer for. And some firms, if they really get down to, okay, if we're going to eliminate the grouchy people and the people that don't like people, so that they don't accidentally get people under them that they're supposed to give feedback to or meet with, and they don't want to, and it's painful, because some firms cause that, and then the people assigned to those people don't thrive. So if I really skinny it down, I might have too many people for each person. And then that's where firms are starting to look at outside talent advisor roles and bringing in people that are not in an accounting graduate circumstance, or maybe they left public accounting because they wanted to do more people and relational stuff, but the firm said, no, you've got to be a technical biller. And now firms are like, hey, come on back, or come in HR professionals into our large tax department where we don't have any people, or very many. Come in here and be a full-time career advisor for us, and we'd like to have you advise 10 or 12 people, perhaps. And that's their job, and they're not billing, and they're not serving clients. And some of you might be listening to this and thinking, well, how can they give accurate feedback when they're not managing the jobs? or they're not seeing the technical output from these people, or they're not seeing the client work papers or that sort of thing. And that a great talent advisor doesn't have to directly work on any projects with the people they coach. We coach at Convergence in our leadership programs, and we don't deliver technical work with these people at all, but we have mechanisms for pulling feedback from the people inside their firms that do work with them on projects, and regularly creating an open dialogue of feedback to us, so we can take feedback from superiors and peers and subordinates and deliver that feedback to the coachee, but also get ongoing progress reports to say, how are they doing now that we've been working on these things? Have you seen any movement, or has it improved, or how is their growth, or how are they grasping these things? And we can get that feedback and then deliver it either jointly or by ourselves. And people hear that feedback as if it were coming directly from whoever, because it's coming from us, their trusted coach. If you got enough trust in that relationship, you don't have to be the witness that saw it.
Right. I think that's a really good point. And figuring out, how do we, create a model that we're going to have people get developed, or, our people are our number one asset. And I think that's where these, talent advisors, whether dedicated talent advisors or external talent advisors, is coming from. And you have to be really clear about, back to the ownership, who owns what, responsibility around that. And, sometimes I think it gets confused, and, we'll have, maybe talent advisors, or we'll have schedulers or resource managers, or even our engagement managers, engagement partners, who's responsible for what. And I'm responsible for giving real-time feedback if I'm an engagement, manager, but then also giving Jen feedback on Jack, because she is Jack's career advisor, and, creating that communication cycle, or that communication flow. Now, Jen also owns saying, hey, Tamera, I know you worked on that engagement, with Jack. I want some feedback. What did he do well? What would you say that he should improve, or what's he ready for next, as part of that advocacy? And so there's just not, real transparency around it, or real clarification. So, identifying what that is and what those communication mechanisms are back to that career advisor is critical.
Yes. And, Tamera, I'm cynical. I think I'm going to have to use the word cynical. I wanted to say practical. I'm trying really hard to make it sound more positive than it is, but I'm going to call it what it is. I'm going to call it what it is. I'm cynical enough to say, yes, you need those feedback mechanisms. So I'm the career coach. Hey, everybody, I'm the career coach for Susan, and making that clear. And here's how you can feedback to me. And here's the cadence of my meetings and with her. And so please, get me feedback. But I'm cynical enough to know that doesn't work very well, because everybody's too darn busy, and they're trying to gather feedback on the people they might be the career advisor for, or deliver client service or whatever. So as a career advisor, I just always tell people, plan on you pulling feedback out of people at first, a little bit like pulling teeth or something. It's going to be hard, because they don't want to give the feedback that's negative, or they don't want to share some of their concerns or issues. And especially peers or subordinates, they don't want to get anyone in trouble. And so it's going to take you a while to get like real feedback that's authentic and valuable and all of that, unless you have some blind feedback mechanisms in place, some anonymous or curated by a third party that's impartial and not going to tell you who said it or whatever. Then people will be a little more open. So just know that you're going to have to go out there and build relationships with the people you're assigned to work for and work with, and get enough credibility and enough trust that they'll tell you, hey, I'm not sure she's grasping it enough to make it to the next level. And a peer would hate to say that about a peer, unless, they really trusted that somebody was going to do something very careful with that. And also maybe very constructive, trying to help them grasp it, trying a different way of getting the learning across or whatever, instead of like, being punitive or overreacting to feedback, all this stuff that can happen when people say the truth, their truth. So anyway, a skilled career advisor would build those relationships and get people to say, oh yeah, I meant to tell you this about Susan. And they just say it confidently. For a while, it'll be hard to get that honest feedback, I think.
Yes. Well, and I think just to, maybe one wrap up thought is we have to be careful that as we, put these roles and expectations in place, it doesn't mean, okay, now, Jack has a career advisor that I don't ever need to give feedback, or, HR is going to do it now. Sometimes we see that it's like we build out the HR function and HR is going to do it. We don't have to do that anymore here from the engagement or partner or manager level. And then nobody's developing them. It goes back to, the ownership, and it's like nobody owns that. And we're making the mistake or maybe some assumptions that HR owns that, or this, resource manager owns this, or this external talent person owns it. Somebody has to feed them that feedback. And I like your strategy, Jen. Go get it. Like we have to put places, and build that trust and that rapport to be able to do that. But we also have to be careful. We're not all now hands off and nobody's developing our people. And then we're like, people are not progressing. We're not, all the complaints that come around with that, especially in our tight, capacity. We have to say who owns that, who's that advocate that's progressing them. So that's the risk we have to watch for, is now nobody owns it.
Tamera, that's so good and so bad, but you're right. Like now I'm the career advisor and I have these 3 people and nobody ever speaks to them again.
Right.
They just speak to me, and that would be horrible, so for sure we want to arm every person on our team with the ability to address failed expectations, or to encourage shifting behavior or mindset, to encourage change from others. And then the ideal scenario is I'm the engagement manager for the person you manage. I notice something and I give them feedback, and then I make sure to say to you, hey, I gave some feedback to William the other day, and I want to tell you what it was, so that you can, kind of make note of it in your notes and see if you get other feedback like that, or if it improves. And that's the ideal. That's the perfect scenario. And that's what we want to get to. Yeah.
And it's normal. Your HR function is probably growing. You're probably changing and evolving your career advisors or your career coaches, maybe implementing it for the first time, or redefining it, or adding new people for sure. So this is going to be normal to have to stop and say, where are we? And let's clarify expectations and let's talk about this. So that's why we thought it was important to spend a few minutes on this and say, let's get really clear about who owns what in our talent development, and making sure that we're communicating that. So we look forward to seeing you, not next week, but the week after we will see you. And in the meantime, let us know if there's any topics that you like.
Well, he's got ideas, Tamera. He has ideas.
He does have ideas. He just has to go to the cabin. So, all right.
He's totally got ideas. But I'll also, just to say this, as we're wrapped, there's a part 2 to this. And it's the whole idea of, once we define people development in our department or service line or group, then what are the other roles in ownership? And I think we should, at some point carry this forward and talk about that too. So
I love that. Thank you. All right. Have a great week.
You too. Thanks.